I still remember the exact moment my sister Emma looked at my house and said, "How do you even live in this shoebox? It's embarrassing." Her words cut deeper than any knife ever could. But what happened 3 weeks later, when that real estate agent knocked on my door, changed everything. Not just about my house, but about my entire relationship with my family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Clara Peterson, and I'm 41 years old. I live in what most people would call a modest home, a 950-square-foot bungalow built in 1962 on the outskirts of Millbrook, Oregon. It's tucked away on a quiet street called Willowbend Lane, surrounded by towering oak trees that I planted with my late husband 15 years ago. The house has 2 small bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opens into a living room, and a basement that doubles as my home office. To most people, including my family, it's nothing special. To me, it's been everything. I bought this house 12 years ago, right after Daniel died in a car accident. We'd been married for 8 years, and his death left me shattered in ways I didn't think were possible. I was 39 then, childless by choice, and suddenly faced with a world that felt too big and too empty. Our old house, a sprawling, 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs, felt like a museum of memories I couldn't bear to walk through anymore. Every room echoed with laughter that would never return, plans that would never be fulfilled. So I sold it. I took the insurance money, the proceeds from the sale, and I bought this little house cash. My family thought I was having a breakdown. My older sister Emma, who's always lived in a 4,000-square-foot McMansion with her investment banker husband, was particularly vocal about my decision. "Clara, this is ridiculous," she said when I first brought her to see the place. "You're moving backwards. Successful people don't downsize at 40. They expand." That conversation happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in September. Emma had insisted on seeing my new home, and I'd made the mistake of inviting her over for coffee. She walked through each room with pursed lips, making little tutting sounds under her breath. When we finished the tour, she stood in my small living room, hands on her hips, and shook her head. "It's just so small," she said finally. "And this neighborhood? Clara, you could afford so much better." I tried to explain that I didn't want bigger. I wanted quieter. I wanted simpler. I wanted a place where I could start healing without being constantly reminded of what I'd lost. But Emma has never been good at understanding things that don't fit her definition of success. Emma is 3 years older than me, and she spent most of our lives trying to steer my choices. When we were kids, she'd rearrange my toys the right way. In high school, she'd edit my papers without asking. In college, she tried to convince me to switch majors from art history to business. "Be practical, Clara," she'd say. "Think about your future." Now, at 44, she runs a successful marketing firm, drives a white BMW X5, and lives in a house with rooms they never use. Her idea of a good life is one that looks impressive from the outside. My idea of a good life became something entirely different after Daniel died. I learned that happiness doesn't always translate into square footage, that sometimes less space means more room to breathe. But explaining this to Emma was like trying to describe color to someone who's only ever seen black and white. The house itself was built by a local craftsman named Theodore Hammerstein. I discovered this when I found old blueprints in the basement during my first month here. Hammerstein had a reputation for attention to detail, and you could see it everywhere. The crown molding was hand-carved. The hardwood floors were made from local maple trees. The windows were positioned to capture natural light perfectly throughout the day. The small size wasn't a limitation. It was intentional design. But none of this mattered to Emma. To her, small equaled less valuable, less successful, less worthy of respect. She made this clear every time she visited, which, mercifully, wasn't often. My other siblings had more tactful ways of expressing their disapproval. My younger brother Jake would ask questions like, "So, when are you planning to get a real house? Again?" My parents, bless them, tried to be supportive, but I could see the concern in their eyes whenever they came over. They'd grown up during the Depression, and to them, owning a bigger house was a symbol of security and success. They couldn't understand why their daughter would voluntarily choose less. The neighborhood itself was part of what made my house special. Willowbend Lane is a short, dead-end street with only 8 houses. My neighbors are a mix of retirees, young families, and single professionals like myself. There's Mrs. Chen, an 80-year-old retired teacher who grows the most amazing vegetables in her backyard. There's the Morrison family, 2 teachers, with 3 young children who always have bikes and tricycles scattered on their small front lawn. And there's David, a freelance graphic designer who works from home and has become one of my closest friends. None of these neighbors live in large houses. Most of the homes on our street are similar to mine. Small, well-maintained bungalows built in the 1960s and 1970s. But what we lack in square footage, we make up for in community. We have block parties every summer. We watch each other's houses when someone goes out of town. We share tools and recipes and recommendations for contractors. This sense of community was something I'd never experienced in my old neighborhood. The houses there were spread out, hidden behind tall fences and manicured lawns. People drove into their garages and disappeared. Here, on Willowbend Lane, people actually talked to each other. When I was struggling through grief counseling those first 2 years, Mrs. Chen would leave containers of homemade soup on my doorstep without saying a word. David would shovel my driveway in winter without being asked. The Morrisons' kids would draw me pictures with sidewalk chalk. But Emma never saw any of this. When she visited, she focused on what the house lacked. No wine cellar, no dedicated office, no guest suite, no formal dining room, no walk-in closets, no jacuzzi tub, no 3-car garage. The list of missing amenities was endless in her mind. What Emma didn't see were the things that made this house feel like home. She didn't notice the built-in bookshelves that Daniel and I had talked about having someday. She didn't see the perfect window seat in the kitchen where I could drink my morning coffee and watch the sunrise. She didn't appreciate the efficient layout that meant I could cook dinner while chatting with friends in the living room. She didn't understand that heating and maintaining 950 square feet meant I could afford to travel, to take art classes, to donate to causes I care about. My house became my sanctuary. I painted the walls in colors that made me happy. Soft blues in the bedroom, warm yellows in the kitchen, deep greens in the living room. I filled it with plants that Daniel would have loved. I created gallery walls with photos from our travels, my own paintings, and pieces from local artists. I turned the basement into a studio where I could pursue the art I'd abandoned during my corporate years. Every corner of this house told a story. Not of what I'd lost, but of what I was building. A life that was smaller in scope, perhaps, but richer in meaning. A life that was mine, designed by my choices, for my happiness. The kitchen became the heart of my new life. It's tiny by Emma's standards, maybe 100 square feet, but it's perfectly appointed. I have a small island that doubles as a dining table, open shelving that displays my grandmother's china, a window over the sink that looks out onto my backyard garden. I learned to cook properly in that kitchen. Daniel had always been the cook. Between us, and after he died, I survived on takeout and frozen meals for months. But in my little kitchen, I slowly rediscovered the joy of preparing food. I started with simple things: pasta, salads, soups. Eventually, I worked up to more complex dishes. I began inviting friends over for dinner parties, cramming 6 people around my small table, everyone talking and laughing as dishes were passed around. Emma came to one of these dinner parties about 18 months after I'd moved in. I'd invited her because I wanted her to see how happy I was, how this house worked for me. But she spent the entire evening making subtle comments about the tight quarters. "Oh, Clara, we can barely fit around this table. Where should I put my purse? There's really nowhere to set it down. Is there somewhere I can freshen up? Oh, just the one bathroom?" By the end of the night, I was exhausted from trying. To manage her discomfort while hosting 6 other people who were genuinely enjoying themselves, after everyone left, I sat on my couch, looking around my small living room and cried. Not because Emma was wrong, but because her inability to see what I'd built made me feel so alone. But I wasn't alone. My chosen family, friends from grief, counseling, neighbors from my street, colleagues from the part-time consulting work I'd started, they all understood what this house meant. They saw how carefully I'd curated each space. They appreciated the thought that went into every decision. They celebrated the fact that I'd created something that brought me peace. David, my neighbor, was particularly supportive. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He'd been through his own difficult divorce a few years before I moved in, and he understood the desire to start over in a space that felt completely your own. We'd often sit on one of our front porches in the evenings, talking about our days, our dreams, our challenges. He never once suggested that I needed more space or a different house. He saw what I was building and respected it. My work life had changed too. After Daniel died, I left my high-stress marketing executive position at a Fortune 500 company. The corporate world that had once excited me felt meaningless in the face of grief. I started freelance consulting, working with small businesses and nonprofits on their marketing strategies. This meant I could work from home, which was perfect for my new lifestyle. My basement office became my professional sanctuary, a space where I could be creative and productive without the politics and pressure of corporate life. Emma couldn't understand this career shift either. "You had such a successful career," she'd say. "Why throw it all away to work with businesses that probably can't even pay you properly?" She couldn't see that success, for me, had been redefined. I was making enough money to live comfortably, I had complete control over my schedule, and I was working with people whose missions I believed in. That felt like a better version of success than climbing a corporate ladder I no longer cared about. Money, it turned out, went much further when you weren't paying a massive mortgage, property taxes on a huge lot, and utility bills for heating and cooling spaces you didn't use. I was able to pay off my house in full within 3 years of buying it. This financial freedom meant I could afford things Emma couldn't understand, like taking a month off to travel through Europe, or spending money on handmade furniture that suited my space perfectly, or investing in high-quality art supplies. For my newfound passion for painting, the neighborhood continued to evolve while I was settling in. 3 of the houses turned over during my first 5 years there. Each time, I worried about who would move in, whether they would fit with the community we'd built. But somehow, Willowbend Lane seemed to attract people who appreciated what we had. A young couple bought the Morrison house when they moved across town. A retired pilot and his wife took over Mrs. Henderson's place when she moved to assisted living. Each new family brought their own energy but maintained the spirit of the neighborhood. My morning routine became sacred to me. I'd wake up around 7 a.m., make coffee using the French press Daniel had given me for Christmas one year, and sit on my window seat watching the neighborhood come to life. David would leave for his morning jog. Mrs. Chen would step out to check on her vegetables. The Garrison kids would wait for the school bus at the corner, their backpacks oversized on their small frames. This simple ritual reminded me every day that I'd chosen well, but Emma's judgment continued to wear on me. She had a way of making comments that stuck, that made me question choices I'd thought I was at peace with. After every family gathering, I'd go home to my small house and see it for a moment through her eyes. The narrow hallway, the single bathroom, the lack of a proper guest room, the driveway that could barely fit 2 cars, the absence of a home office that didn't require going to the basement. These doubts usually faded after a few days back in my routine. I'd remember why I chose this house, how it had healed me, how it continued to nurture the person I was becoming. But the seed of insecurity Emma planted kept growing, especially as the years passed and she succeeded in making me feel like I was somehow failing at adulthood. The situation came to a head during my 40th birthday party. I decided to host it at my house, which meant getting creative with space. I moved furniture, set up a buffet table in the kitchen, strung lights in the backyard. About 20 people came, family, neighbors, close friends. It was a warm April evening, and we spilled out into the yard, people standing on the small deck, sitting on the front steps, gathering in clusters wherever they could find space. Emma arrived late as usual, dressed in an outfit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She looked around at the crowded spaces, the makeshift party setup, the mix of furniture styles that had come from different phases of my life. "Clara," she said after kissing my cheek, "you really need to think about getting a proper house. This is getting ridiculous. You're 40 now. This tiny place worked when you were dealing with grief, but it's time to move on." Her words carried across the group despite her attempt to speak quietly. I saw my friends and neighbors exchange glances. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. Here I was, surrounded by people who loved and supported me, in a space that had literally saved my life, and Emma was still focused on what was wrong with it. But something had changed in me over the years. Maybe it was the confidence that came from building something I loved. Maybe it was the support of my chosen family. Maybe I was just tired of apologizing for choices that made me happy. "Emma," I said, loud enough for others to hear, "this house is exactly what I need. I'm not moving on from it. I'm moving forward with it. There's a difference." She looked surprised by my directness. We'd always danced around this conflict before, with me making excuses or trying to change the subject. But that night, I was done dancing. The party continued, and slowly, the conversation shifted to other topics. My friends and neighbors rallied around me, sharing stories of why they loved small spaces, talking about the benefits of simplicity, praising the sense of community on our street. Emma left early, claiming she had another event to attend. After everyone else had gone, David helped me clean up. We worked in comfortable silence, washing dishes in my small kitchen, folding up the extra chairs I'd borrowed from neighbors. "You did good tonight," he said finally, "standing up for yourself like that." I nodded, but inside I was shaking. Confronting Emma always left me feeling drained and uncertain. Had I been too harsh? Was she right about needing more space? Was I really just stuck in the past? These questions might have consumed me for days, but something happened the next week that changed everything. I received a call from a real estate agent named Jennifer Walsh. She introduced herself and said she specialized in historic homes in the area. "Ms. Peterson," she said, "I drive past your house regularly on my way to work. I've always admired it, and I have clients who are specifically looking for homes in your neighborhood. Would you be interested in selling?" I laughed. "Oh no, absolutely not. This house isn't for sale." "Of course," she said quickly. "I understand. But would you mind if I asked what you might consider selling for? Just so I know what range to tell my clients?" I thought for a moment. I'd bought the house for $180,000 12 years ago. It was probably worth around $220,000 now, maybe $240,000 if I was feeling optimistic. "I really have no idea," I admitted. "I've never had it appraised. Would you mind if I came by and took a look?" she asked. "Just to give you an informal assessment? No pressure, no expectations. I'm just curious about the property." Something in her tone made me agree. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the need to know where I stood financially. Or maybe it was Emma's voice in my head, making me wonder if I really was settling for less than I deserved. We made an appointment for the following Thursday afternoon. Jennifer Walsh seemed nice enough on the phone. professional but not pushy. I figured there was no harm in getting an opinion from someone who knew the local market. The week leading up to her visit was strange. I found myself looking at my house with new eyes, trying to see it as a potential buyer might. I noticed things I'd stopped seeing years ago. The way the afternoon light hit the hardwood floors, creating warm golden patterns. The intricate tile work around the bathroom that someone had clearly spent time perfecting. The built-in storage solutions that maximized every inch of space. I also started second-guessing everything Emma had said over the years. What if she was right? What if I really was limiting myself? What if this house was just a security blanket I'd outgrown? But then I'd sit in my window seat with my morning coffee, or work in my cozy basement office, or cook dinner in my efficient kitchen, and these doubts would fade. This house worked for me. It had saved me during the darkest period of my life, and continued to nurture me as I rebuilt. Whatever Jennifer Walsh had to say wouldn't change that. Or so I thought. Thursday afternoon arrived with unusual spring warmth. I'd taken the morning off work to clean the house, though it barely needed it. I'm naturally tidy, and my small space makes it easy to keep everything organized. I'd put fresh flowers on the kitchen table, opened all the windows to let in the fresh air and even baked cookies, filling the house with a warm, welcoming scent. Jennifer Walsh arrived precisely on time. She was a woman in her early 50s, professionally dressed, but with an approachable demeanor. She had graying blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun and wore sensible heels that would work well for house tours. "Ms. Peterson," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me." "Please call me Clara," I replied, leading her inside. She stepped into my small entryway and immediately looked up at the original light fixture, a brass piece with etched glass that I'd had restored rather than replaced. "Oh my," she said softly. "This is lovely." "Original?" "Yes," I said, pleased that she'd noticed. "Most of the fixtures are original." We moved into the living room, and I watched her eyes travel around the space. She wasn't measuring square footage mentally like Emma always did. Instead, she seemed to be noting details. The crown molding, the refinished floors, the way the rooms flowed into each other. "May I ask when this house was built?" she asked. 1962, I replied. "It was designed by a local craftsman named Theodore Hammerstein." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Theodore Hammerstein? Are you sure?" "Yes, I found the original blueprints in the basement." "Why?" She smiled. "Well, that's quite something. May I see the kitchen?" I led her through the small living room into the kitchen. She spent a long time examining the cabinets, opening and closing drawers, running her hand along the countertops. "These are original as well," she murmured. "Incredible condition." We continued the tour, moving through both bedrooms, the bathroom, and down to the basement. At each stop, she made notes in a small leather notebook, taking measurements and photos with her phone. "Would you mind if I looked at the outside?" she asked when we'd finished the interior tour. We stepped out into the backyard, where she examined the small garden I'd created, the original deck Daniel and I had built before he died, and the mature oak trees that provided so much character to the property. "The lot size is quite generous for this neighborhood," she noted. "And these trees, they're magnificent." After about an hour, we returned to the kitchen where I offered her coffee. She accepted, settling into one of the chairs at my small island. "Clara," she said, stirring cream into her coffee, "I need to ask you something. Do you know much about historic preservation districts?" I shook my head. "Not really. Why?" "Well," she said slowly, "your house is about to become quite special." She set down her notebook and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Clara, this neighborhood just qualified for historical district status. The city council voted on it last month. Your house, specifically, is being considered for landmark designation." My heart skipped. Landmark designation? What does that mean? It means your home has been identified as architecturally and historically significant. Theodore Hammerstein wasn't just any craftsman. He was one of the pioneers of what we now call Northwest craftsman style. Only 7 of his houses still exist with original features intact. Yours is one of them. I stared at her. I don't understand. It's just a small house. Jennifer smiled. Clara, your house is about to be appraised at historical value, not just market value. I wanted to prepare you. When the official appraisal happens next week, you might be surprised. 3 days later, Emma called. Clara, I heard some ridiculous rumor that your little house is worth a fortune. That can't be true, can it? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. Someone from the Historical Society is coming Tuesday. Emma laughed. Historical Society? For your house? Clara, be realistic. It's cute, but it's still just 950 square feet in an okay neighborhood. Tuesday arrived faster than I expected. Margaret Chen, a representative from the Oregon Historical Society, arrived with the official appraiser. They spent 3 hours documenting every detail: the hand-carved moldings, the original brass hardware, the intact Hammerstein kitchen design. When they finished, Margaret sat with me at my kitchen table. Clara, your home has been officially designated as a city landmark. It will be listed in the National Register of Historic Places. What does that mean for the value? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She smiled. The conservative estimate puts it at $2 million. If you sold to a historical preservation buyer, potentially $5 million. Your house isn't just a home anymore. It's a piece of Oregon's architectural heritage. I called Emma that evening. I got the official appraisal. Oh, good, she said, already sounding bored. How much is the little place worth now? 250? 275? $2 million. Silence. Then, what? $2 million, Em. Maybe more. That's impossible. Clara, there must be a mistake. No mistake. My house is a Theodore Hammerstein. Original. It's being designated as a historic landmark. Emma couldn't speak. I heard her breathing change, could picture her face contorting with disbelief and something else. Envy, maybe. Or embarrassment. Emma, there's something I need to say. You've spent 12 years telling me this house was too small, not good enough, embarrassing. You made me doubt my choices. But this house was never about impressing anyone. It was about healing, about finding peace, about building a life that mattered to me. Clara, I'm not finished. I'm happy you're successful. I'm proud of your achievements. But your idea of worth isn't mine. My worth isn't measured in square footage or mortgage payments. It's measured in contentment, in community, in the courage to choose differently. Emma was crying. I could hear it in her voice when she finally spoke. I'm sorry. I've been so focused on what I thought success looked like that I didn't see what you actually built. The following week, Jennifer called with news. Clara, I have several buyers interested. One collector is offering $4 million cash. Another preservation group is offering $3 million, but guaranteeing to maintain the house's historic integrity. Thank you, I said, but I'm not selling. Oh, may I ask why? I looked around my small kitchen at the morning light streaming through my window, at my art supplies scattered on the counter. Because worth isn't just about money. This house gave me my life back. It taught me that smaller can be better. That value comes from things you can't measure. That sometimes the most precious things come in the smallest packages. 6 months later, Emma visited again. This time, she noticed everything differently. The careful restoration work, the thoughtful use of space, the way every corner held purpose and beauty. I was wrong, she said quietly. I've been looking at houses all wrong. Size doesn't equal value. No, I agreed. It doesn't. We sat in my small living room, drinking tea, finally understanding each other. Emma's house might be bigger, but mine had taught us both what really mattered. That evening, as Emma prepared to leave, she hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "You knew something I didn't." After she left, I stood in my doorway, looking at my small house, my 950-square-foot sanctuary that the world now valued at over $1 million. But I'd known its true worth all along. It had saved me, healed me, and taught me to value what really mattered. The next morning, I received a letter from the city. They wanted to feature my house in their Historic Homes of Oregon guidebook. I smiled and set the letter on my kitchen counter, next to my coffee mug and my morning crossword. My house was small, my life was rich, and finally, everyone understood the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.